Hello, this is Dr. Lori. Welcome to this video on the McNemar chi-square test. So in other videos, we've talked about the chi-square test in general. We've looked at how that can be a chi-square goodness of fit or a test of independence. The test of independence can be a 2x2 table. And so sometimes the chi-square test of independence can be confused with the McNemar chi-square. The difference is in the question that we're asking the test to perform for us. So the kinds of questions that we can ask of the McNemar chi-square test is whether there is a change in some kind of a yes-no or dichotomous variable over time. So that's one of the kinds of questions that we can ask. So for example, there is a hypothetical scenario where we assembled 200 people and we asked them a simple survey question: are you interested in visiting Salt Lake City? So here we are, are you interested in visiting Salt Lake City? And we asked them this question before some kind of intervention. And a bunch of them said yes, some of them said no. And then we had them watch a show of some kind. And then after the show, we asked them the same question: are you interested in visiting Salt Lake City? After this thing had happened. And because they're the same people, I think there were 200 people altogether, we had 200 people answer the before intervention, yes, no. And we had the same 200 people answer the are you interested in visiting Salt Lake City afterwards? Yes, no. And what we're really interested in knowing is about the change. And so people who said yes before and said yes after, we don't really care about that cell. It could be any number. And then the people who said, no, I'm not interested, and then afterwards they said, no, I'm not interested still. Clearly the intervention did not have an effect on them. And so we're not really interested in that particular group. What we are interested in is the cells where there's a change. And so specifically in this example, we had 22 people who before they watched the show said yes, and then after they watched the show, they said no. And then the same kind of thing happened where we have a change here where before the show they said no and after the show they said yes. And so it's this difference that we're interested in observing what happened so that these people had a change of heart. And so these are the only two cells that end up getting added to the equation. You can see that in your Jekyll textbook if you're interested in calculating the McNemar chi-square. I don't think anybody's ever going to ask you to do that on an exam. But conceptually, what we're interested in knowing is, was there some kind of a change? The other scenario that can be very similar to this, and these headers actually change, but conceptually it's the same, is we'll have a scenario where we have a case control study where the cases and controls are matched to each other. So we have these matched pairs, and in your textbook it talks about an example of 54 matched pairs. And so we end up with 54 cases and 54 controls. And what we're interested in understanding is where the cases and controls don't align with each other. They were matched to each other presumably on certain factors, possibly such as gender or age. And then now we want to see something about a history to exposure of some kind of element. And in this particular example, it was to cutting oil that was related to the job that they had, to the employment. And to see if that's related to whether a person is a case or a control. So you can read about those in your textbook. I encourage you to do that and go through those examples. McNemar chi-square is a really simple test to perform, and so it's used in the literature sometimes. So be familiar with the kinds of questions that can be asked, and that will be very helpful to you. Thank you for joining me.